Well, hello and welcome to the AFS Technologies Monthly Learning Series. Thank you to all for joining us today. My name is Ian Faith and I will be moderating today's session entitled Managing Inventory with Status. In today's webinar, Fran Rifkin, WMS Product Manager at AFS Technologies, will be presenting this webinar on warehouse efficiencies, managing inventory with status. So what will you learn by attending this webinar? In the warehouse, product is always, even if you don't have a process established, in some kind of status. Spoiled, expired, in QC, in production, or various other stages. Regardless of the perishability of your product, it is important for efficiency to have a system in place. We will review different ways in your operation for providing visibility and alerts. Travis Yoder from Four Seasons Produce will join us to discuss how status has become an integral part of their operational procedures to ensure produce freshness. As the WMS Product Manager, Fran works closely with the WMS teams and new product development. Fran has 20 plus years experience assisting companies to implement WMS systems, along with contributing to customer services and support. Travis Yoder from Four Seasons family of companies. He started working there in June of 1998 on the first shift receiving crew. He's held a variety of roles within the warehouse between 1998 and 2007, including unloading trucks, receiving, selecting, high lift operator, and WMS coordinator. During his years as a WMS coordinator, he is mentored to take over as operations specialist, which he has been doing now for the last 9 years. So this is what being purpose-built is all about. So Fran and Travis, thank you again. Travis, could you tell us a little bit about the Four Seasons family of companies?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ian. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. So as Ian said, I'm operations specialist here at Four Seasons Produce. The Four Seasons is actually made up of 4 individual companies, and we're named the Four Seasons family of companies. The produce company we're a wholesale distributor. We supply organic, local, and conventional produce to the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast regions of the United States here. We also have our Earth Source trading company. They're kind of a grower representative that they import organic and conventional produce into the states here and just help facilitate sales throughout the states for the grower. We also have our Sunrise Logistics company, which is a full-service logistics provider. Some of the services they offer are just warehousing and distribution. We also have a packing and ripening facility here that we can ripen produce for other companies. And they offer transportation solutions as well. Our final company is the Sunrise Transport Company, and that's just our transportation department. We're made up of maybe 100 drivers or so. We have 120 different vehicles, doing maybe 70 to 100 routes per night. That's just a little bit about Four Seasons. I consider it a privilege just to work for this company. It actually started out as a roadside stand, and it grew into what it is today. Now there's over 600 employees, I believe. So
wow, that's fantastic.
It's really grown from what it was. Actually, this year we're celebrating 40 years with the company. So 40 years of operation. It's pretty incredible, the journey that's kind of taken place here.
Yeah, Travis, it's been really interesting for me as well because I've done quite a few of these sort of interviews and webinars with different warehouses, and it's great to hear their story from their inception and where they came from, and yours being a little roadside stand to where it's at now with 600 employees. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
absolutely.
Well, I will turn it over to you and Fran for the rest of the presentation.
So part of as Ian mentioned, the focus for today's webinar is talking about status, different types of status and managing. So, the first part is just with Four Seasons. One of the things that I've noticed is that they did have a number of different ones that they use to manage the different areas of their operation. So what does that status do for you? Like, why even put a status on inventory? And so if Travis, maybe we can kind of just go through a little bit, like what made you, start to do this?
Yeah, well, I mean, from the start, we had a few unit statuses. They're kind of a necessity. The main reason being that you might need to restrict product from being shipped. If you don't have product in a unit status, replenishments or shipping tasks can allocate to that product. So for us, I would say that that's the main reason that we use it, is just to prevent that product from going out. So we started out with just a few reasons, and as the company grew or more needs arose, it kind of branched off into many more different reason codes. So yeah, some other reasons why we might use it is just we want to keep track of inventory that's in a damage status or a recall status, and we've defined each of these unit statuses to mean a different thing based on our business needs, and then we have processes that we follow to kind of help us know what to do with product that's in each individual status.
So, for example, you have a status that's like a government inspection one. That lets you know that you're waiting for someone to come and do on-site to do an inspection of that inventory, correct?
Right. Yeah, that's a common thing that happens in the produce industry. Product might come in and it has quality issues, so we need the USDA to come in to do an official inspection, just to kind of be that middle person to make the final call on the grade of that product. Put that into a federal inspection status, which puts that on hold until a decision can be made on what to do next with the product.
And that's true for like inbound, like a container might come in from another country. So that entire container, it's frozen until it passes that, it clears that inspection, which could happen same day or days later. Like it usually happens pretty fast, but you need to know why you're not shipping it. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, ideally it happens as soon as possible before we've put the product away, but oftentimes, there could be delays in getting the federal inspectors here, or yeah, there's many reasons that it could be delayed, but we may have to put that product into the coolers and store that in reserve locations until the federal inspection actually takes place. So it's important to have that status on there so we're not shipping that product.
Right, and the visibility, like, so you know why it's frozen, so to speak.
Exactly, right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then some, I think, also require action. Like, so this is something now, instead of you're waiting, it's something the warehouse is doing.
Yeah, correct. Like the rework status, that's just an indicator for our packing department that, hey, we have this product on hold for rework. The quality is bad. We want to rework that before it gets shipped out. So we have reports that we can monitor that will track that, and this way they know what product needs to be reworked.
Right. And then I think the last thing too, like why you use status, is also a way to rotate your inventory to ensure that, like, that reworked product, that's the first thing you want shipped out, because that's the oldest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another key status for us, is the rotation status. Yeah, for sure. That since we rotate first in, first out, oftentimes a newer lot that comes in with a newer receive date, it might be a lesser quality than something that came in a couple days ago. So we may need to put the older lot on hold for rotation, just to ensure that we ship out the poor quality or the lesser quality products first.
Right. Okay. And then the next slide is just a little bit more, like kind of an overview, and then we're going to talk about some of these statuses in more detail. But part of the number of different statuses you have, is it just one group that manages everything like the warehouse, or do you have different areas, departments that sort of control, who places that status, initiates, or who can unfreeze that inventory and make it available again?
Yeah, it's a good question. We kind of have this defined for two different groups, one being the warehouse and packing group, and then the other group being QC, buying, and sales. So some of the statuses are initiated by warehouse and packing. Some of them are initiated by QC, buying, and sales. And we've defined them to mean different things for each of those two areas. So it is based on department. And yeah, we also we've kind of given most people the ability to use unit status, and we rely on our status definitions to control how they get used. But we do have the ability by using permissions and user group settings to restrict certain people within those departments from being able to use unit status or enable them. So it depends on how you want to set it up, but you can definitely set it up to restrict or just give it to everyone.
I gotcha. And then, like, how did you decide which ones? So, for example, you have like a couple that are different, QC related ones. How did you come up with that list? I mean, so, I know that, out of the box, WMS, we have a couple that we suggest, but you've grown. So how did you come about the ones that you have in place?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I honestly don't even remember which were the original ones that we had, but I think maybe out of the box we had the missing inventory, the damage status, maybe quality control. But it seemed like the one unit status, quality control, it just kind of became a catch-all for a lot of different reason codes. So then we would end up seeing the quality control status, but then we would end up asking questions like, well, is it on hold for rework, or why is it on hold for QC? So from there, it just kind of morphed into, well, hey, we could just add another unit status and just define that for a different reason code, so with a different reason. And so if it just really is as the need arose, I think most recently we added in the quarantine and the recall status. So before that would have been lumped into quality control. And with the Food Safety Modernization Act, there's just been a lot more strict standards put in place. So part of our food safety program is to help designate, when something is in quarantine. So yeah, it really just has come from business needs as the company is growing.
Gotcha, and that makes sense. That rather than having one status and then have to ask questions like why it was put on that status, the status itself becomes more detailed to provide that instant visibility. So when you look at your report, right away, like, okay, this is why it's on that hold status.
Right. Yeah. If you find yourself questioning, like, if you have a status quality control, but then you find yourself asking the question, well, if there's multiple reasons within that quality control bucket, that's the time that you maybe want to start thinking about adding a different status.
Right, the status itself, right? And then one of the things that I found interesting, I mean, and I've seen customers do this different ways. Like sometimes you have inventory that could overlap. What it looks like with your operation is that it's only one status at a time. So it's and I think that helps with that visibility. So it's specifically why it's where it is. But a product itself could be across many statuses. Like, so at any given time, one product could be, you got some things that are in rework and some things that are maybe waiting inspection. So, but it makes it easy to manage with that detailed status that you put on the inventory itself. And then, go ahead, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to agree with you. Yeah, that's accurate. Mm-hmm.
And then, so part of, I think what's interesting too is based on the status, it's kind of like a flow chart, like the next, evolution, based on that status. So I think what here, sort of a breakdown then of your different statuses by area, by department. So starting with, I think one of the big ones is your QC buyers. Who initiate those statuses, starting with the one we just discussed, quality control. When would, so it's QC or buyers that would see maybe certain lots of that product that maybe it's been there for, and again, please elaborate, like, is it that it's been there a couple of days and they just want to check it, and maybe if there's concern of it not being available, like it's not, maybe some of it's not, no longer looks good, so you don't want to ship it, that's when you put that quality control status.
Yeah, that's right. It actually could happen right after the product comes in. If we're waiting on a determination on what we need to do with it, it could go on QC hold, quality control hold, or if it needs like a reinspection, if somebody notices that a pallet might have some mold in it or something. So they would just put that pallet on QC hold until we could get a full inspection on it. So it's really product that we're not sure what we want to do with this yet, but we want to freeze it and put it in status until a decision can be made.
Right, and just to ensure that it doesn't get shipped, like if even a small portion of it is questionable, to allow someone to go back and recheck it. So it's like a flag to go back and recheck it.
Right, exactly.
It's not necessarily, again, like it's not all the product, it's not even all that product lot. It's like you said, it could just be, you receive 5 pallets in and one pallet may be somewhat questionable. That only that specific pallet is where you would put the hold, correct?
Yeah, yep.
And then it's in limbo. So at this point, would you move off, let's say, the portion that was questionable? If the rest of it was okay, then that remaining portion you would take off the status, and now that becomes available to ship?
Yeah, that could be the case. I think oftentimes it comes down to the actual lot. So but yeah, it could be an individual pallet that is the problem, and yeah, we would release the rest of the pallets just based on that reinspection. Sure.
Okay, and then typically, like what happens is at that point, would it be that if there is still questionable, it might turn into another status? So you would unfreeze, take off the quality control, but then it would go right into another status. So it's still on hold, it wouldn't get shipped. But what, like as far as if there was an issue, what's an example of what that quality control would turn into?
Well, one example could be it could go into a rework status. So the rework status is just a flag for our packing department, in which they monitor everything that's in a rework status, and they will bring the product over and sort through it and pull out the bad and leave the good. And they'll do that on an as-needed basis based on our sales for the night. So yeah, it could go right into that rework status.
Okay, well, and that's a good transition. That's the next one, rework. So this is another one that QC, and it's QC decides that that's going to be the transition, or that when they look at this inventory, they decide, okay, this needs rework. Is it always QC who places the status, or they might just communicate that and it's the warehouse that will still place the status for the inventory?
Yeah, for us, it's probably collaboration between the QC and the buyers. Though generally QC has, the best understanding of the quality of the product, but it would be that collaboration between the QC and buyers who is initiating it. They may ask, somebody from the warehouse to freeze it with that status, but in general, the QC inspectors would be the ones to place that on hold using the status.
Okay, and then so what happens with that inventory? So let's say you've got a couple of pallets, it has that rework status. does it come off and it can be available to be shipped? Or do you have to, like, what happens when you rework it? Like, what is it, like, sort of a typical scenario now with, like, this item?
Well, our packing team would be monitoring for the items that need reworked. And, you know, usually it's based on what's sold for tonight. They want to rework it on an as-needed basis. So they will have their operators go over and get that product. They would bring it over. And we would actually kind of pull it out of PRIA, and we would perform the repack job in our host system. And then once we bring that product back into PRIA, it would come back in with just the good product, and we would bring it in, you know, just in a regular stock status, and to ensure that, and we want that to go out shipped first.
Right, and so it may be even that you then look at other lots you have for that product. You might put that on that rotation status to force this stuff to go ahead, so that this will be the next thing shipped.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that rotation status is used in conjunction with the rework status, which I think we'll get into the rotation status a little later. Yep.
And then another status used by QC is quarantine, and this is one of the ones you said was a new one. How is quarantine different than, say, like quality control? Like, what was the reason for maybe creating that uniqueness here?
Yes, the quarantine reason, we needed to pull that out from under the quality control bucket because it had some type of contamination or suspected contamination. So it just needed to be pulled out because the quality control reason code meant something different.
Yeah, sort of quick question. Is it that, like, the quality control, maybe, like you said, mold, maybe it was like a visual, like obvious, like maybe why it was put on hold. Quarantine, it may not be so obvious. So you specifically use that quarantine so they understand that this is why we put it on hold, because maybe a contamination, you can't see it, but there's something there. Would that be?
Yeah, that's accurate. And a good example of it would be, you know, we have organic and conventional product. So to our organic customers, it's a very big deal to have that organic status, you know. And if we also have wet product, like wet vegetables that we store in our wet rooms. So sometimes conventional product may be placed over top of organic by mistake, and that liquid from the conventional products might drip down into a pallet of conventional product. Well, that's actually a really big deal, you know, because now you've just contaminated that organic product with the water from the conventional pallet. So that would be one example where we use quarantine. So the product would be placed on hold. An evaluation would be made about whether or not the whole pallet what needs to be done with it. We may choose to dump that product. We may choose to sell it in a conventional line, since it's no longer
not organic. And so do you actually?
Yeah, it can no longer be considered organic.
It's a good product. So, like, would you change the product code at that point? So you would take the status off and convert it maybe to the conventional product, and then it becomes shippable.
Right. Yeah, and in order to do that, sometimes it's more cost effective to just dump it because you got to take all the labeling off. You might have to rebox it. So yeah, sometimes it's just it kind of stinks, but
yeah, no, I know we talked about this too. Like, I think some of your other statuses, that another option is you might recode it. Maybe, and this is a question too. Like, do you leave the labels on? Because it's actually still good product, instead of dumping it, you might put the different product code, and then it goes, say, to a food bank. So it's you can still, like, you know, like how you dispose it. Again, like QC is making that determination, but based on these statuses, it helps them to provide the best outcome possible. Is that
right? Yeah. Yeah, that's true as well. We may choose to put it in, unfreeze it, put it back into a stock status, and then we would actually put it into a different code, and maybe sell it or give it away to the food bank. Mm-hmm.
That ensures that, like, for the conventional products going to your customers, they don't get it by accident. So you've got a lot of sort of safety in what you're doing with these different processes to ensure that it's going to the outcome, it's going to the right place.
Yes.
Another one we have is recall. I know that you said too, like, this was based on industry and recently, this is when, how would you say, like, recall is now different than, like, the ones above?
Well, yeah, again, recall would have been lumped into the quality control bucket before. But yeah, we wanted to differentiate between have specific status for recall, just so we know what it's for. If the shipper recalls something or the grower, we want to have visibility of that, and we don't want it to be, when we run our reports, we don't want that to be lumped in with that quality control reason, because it's not clear on what the status is for that.
With recall, is there ever a temporary one that you get from your suppliers that you put it on recall and then it lifts off and you just take it off again, or does it usually, it'll flow through to where that recall, it just has to be disposed because there was an issue with it?
I would say generally, if there is a recall, we're leaving it in that status and we're disposing of it in some way. You know, if there's a recall, I mean, people aren't going to just call a recall if they're not sure, you know. Well, they might, I guess, but
again, like,
but generally we're right. Mm-hmm.
If it originated from a recall, it's more likely to get dumped, disposed, because you don't want to.
Right. Yeah, we don't want to take any chances there.
And then another one we have, we touched on this too earlier, that the inspection one, that it comes in inbound. You have that status, so you know that you're waiting for that to clear before it can be shipped. Typically, is it possible that, like, from this it might go to another status, or it usually either if it doesn't clear for some reason, it'll get disposed, or it'll just, once it clears, then the entire that they say product lot now becomes available to ship?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the determination of the federal inspection or the outcome of that. You know, if the product is bad enough, we might reject the product. It might go back to the grower or the vendor. If it's,
sorry, quick question. So if it goes back to the supplier because there was an issue, it didn't clear, do you give that another status to show that it's going back to the supplier, or you to now show that hey, you had the inspection, it didn't clear, it needs to now transition back to the supplier? Like, what would that status be? Or do you control that?
Well, typically this would happen like same day. It would just go back on the truck, and we would just pull that product out of inventory. But yeah, if it was being held for multiple days, it would probably go into the quality control status, or they may put it into a different code. So we actually might use a sales order to deplete the inventory to get it back to the vendor, or I mean, there's a couple of different ways we could handle it.
Okay. Right. And then continuation, because there were a number that were initiated by the QC buyers. Another one status was one where it's like specific to the customer.
Yeah. Yeah, the hold specific customer status code. This is generally kind of comes from sales. So a customer might require better quality, or on salads they might require 9 days before it expires, versus what's standard for everyone else. So in the system, we want to designate a specific amount of cases for that customer, and this ensures that we get them the good quality or the right lot, the specific lot that will work for that customer. This unit status code also requires a comment, so when you place it on hold, you can't pass through unless you enter a comment. So our standard is that the person placing it on hold will put the sales order number in and the delivery date of when that order is going out. So that way we can have visibility of who it's for, and it's not just frozen specific customer, but we don't know who.
Gotcha. So then that just ensures them that gets it's actually it's where you're shipping it, but you're actually shipping it to a specific customer, that inventory. And then you have something similar to where now it's the reason that you're putting something on hold is for a buyer, for maybe like future. But once they decide, like once it becomes a future, then they take off the status, correct? And then it becomes available. But it just helps you direct it to that inventory to the correct like sales orders.
Right. Yeah. This is the buyer hold is a little bit similar to that. It might generally they're probably dealing with larger quantities, like a specific lot. We want to hold on to a few pallets for a wholesale customer or something like that. Yeah, it is kind of similar to the specific customer one, but yeah, if it's a hold initiated by the buyer for whatever reason, it's just kind of there for them. I don't know that it's specific to just future sales. It could be other reasons that the buyer has.
Like something they want to hold, like for any reason. Is this one also one that they would put a comment in so you could see why they put it on hold?
Yeah, this is another one that requires a comment. So really, it could be any reason, and honestly, it's not one that I see too often or am as familiar with. I think it's just there for the buyer for whatever reason.
And I think what's neat about the comments too, what I like, or one of the things that you just touched on, is that like with the specific customer, it's got an order number, it's got a date, so that if you see, okay, it's now the next day and it's still there, did it get forgotten? So like because you don't want to waste product, that's good. So it kind of keeps it high visibility, so you know at some point, okay, it's been here for a while. What happened with it? Mm-hmm. It's still there.
No, that would never happen to us. No, you're right. That kind of stuff. It can get missed. Just because it's frozen with a status, there is no indicator there to say, hey, this order is going out tonight. Right. So there is other processes that you're going to need to put in place to ensure that once you freeze it, a specific customer, well, the person shipping the order needs to still know through maybe we use SharePoint lists that they might put that sales order in, so there's visibility of that.
And I've seen customers where they'll use other things, sometimes like a lot, to indicate I want this specific lot for a customer. But if especially where like in your operation, you might have 5 pallets with the same lot, and even with that same lot, you might have some like quality that's a little bit better than others. And if you want this specific customer to get the best quality, then putting a status on that specific pallet ensures that like they're going to get that pallet, not just any pallet for that lot. So it's
exactly
a way that you're doing it, but it gives you that tighter control. And then I think this is the last one for QC. We touched on a bit, the rotation. To just by putting like a hold status, say on the older inventory, you can like jump over it to get that newer product that's maybe a lesser quality to ship first, such as the product maybe that came from rework. So that was just like the last one I think for QC is just an example of like the statuses that you use. And then the next group is packing. So they may not be the ones that initiate this. It could still be coming from others, but this is really like these statuses are really ones that packing uses for visibility. So the first one, the green hold outs. Can you maybe explain a little bit what that one is? That one I have not seen before.
Yeah, well, and actually if you want to pop the next one up too, so green holdouts and the small and large holdouts, they're very similar in the way we determine it. So just for example, tomatoes, when they come in, a pallet might have product in it that's full red but there also might be product in there that's still a little bit green. And in the same way, there might be some that are smaller or larger, just depending on how they come in or who you're buying from or the source. So what packing will do is they'll go through and they'll sort out the red and the green or the small and the large. But the ones that are left over, the green ones, they'll want to place those with this green holdout status, or the small and the large holdouts, they might use that status as well.
And so again, this ensures that those cases with that status don't get shipped, but then at some point, like a green tomato will naturally, maybe I'm guessing, naturally it will start to ripen, then the status can be taken off and those cases are now available to be shipped, correct?
Right, yeah, that's exactly it. Mm-hmm.
And small, large hold, now typically, I'm guessing again, the size won't really change. What happens with those? Will those go to a different product code to get shipped, or so like it's consistent with that product code, or does it go to like special orders? Like you write it off, like maybe those go to a food bank? So just curious again, like the outcome, like what would you do with those products, which still may be larger than the consistent packaging for that box.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and as I think about it, I believe at one point we had the small and large holdouts separated, and at one point we combined it because I guess we felt that there was not really a need to determine whether it was small or large holdouts. The important thing is that it was, the holdouts because of size. So we could probably change that to a different description. But yeah, in general, the products that's small or large holdouts, they might be placed in another code later, or I think in general that's when we place that in a different code.
I've had another recently. I was talking to another customer that does like scraps, and they'll recode it. And those codes go to like a farm and they feed the pigs. So it's it's not sellable. They have like the different, and the use statuses, similar, like to help control. All right, and then we have also I think we touched on this where you use statuses as a note that action's required. So like the product comes in not labeled, again, like it may be, I'm guessing QC or warehouse, they recognize, I think you said before, it was QC that recognizes, okay, you need a label, but packing, warehouse are the ones that give it that status. Packing puts the label on, and then once it is labeled, it comes off and now it becomes shippable. So like once it's in warehouse with this status, it won't ship because it can't ship without that label first.
Right, yep, and this one is kind of handled, it's similar to rework in that it just provides that visibility to packing that, all right, yeah, this product came in, it needs labeled, and we may be able to get product in cheaper because it's not labeled in a certain way, or a customer is requiring a certain label. So, we'll place it on with that needs label unit status, and packing just their indicator to bring that over and label that product.
And then the last one, partial case. So like if packing uses part of the case for some reason, they have to open it. So now you can't sell it as a full case. That's when they'll give that case a status, which you still may use, but as a partial case status. So like just so they know, you don't want to go out and to charge a case when it's not a whole case at this point.
Right, yeah. We might have a half case of something and we want to put it in inventory, but we can only use full numbers in PREA. So we did have a problem where occasionally, partial cases would get shipped out as a full case. So this way it was just a restriction to not allow that to be shipped.
All right. And then the last area is these are the statuses that are more just warehouse related. So like damaged, if let's say the warehouse, accidentally drops a case, damages it, or it comes in inbound damaged, that's when they may make the call to give it that damage status. What happens with it? Is that damage is still stored in the warehouse, correct?
Yeah, if we have product that is damaged, we have a full damage procedure that we follow. There's a couple different types of damage. We have food safety damage, and then one that we just call quality damage. And there's a process that our users follow when they come across damage in the warehouse. But yeah, this would be one that the warehouse initiates. It's typically QC, buying, and sales. I mean, they're not really involved in the warehouse there, so it makes sense it would just be done by the warehouse. So yeah, once it goes into that damage status, a determination is made whether it's what kind of damage it is, and we have actually separate locations for these two different types of damage. If it's the food safety damage, that product's going to be dumped. It goes into a specific location, and product will end up being deleted from inventory. But if it's just the quality damage, then that product gets reboxed and placed back into inventory, or it may be sold at a reduced price, or go into our little produce market that we have. It just depends on the situation.
All right. That's a really good point. I'm so impressed. Like Four Seasons, they've got this little employee market. So like, let's say like even that partial thing, it's perfectly good product. And so this way it just allows the employees to get that product at an extreme discount. And it's a beautiful little like farmer's market that's available.
Yeah, it's great. That's where I get my lunch every day.
And it's so healthy. I love it. And then the last status we have, missing inventory. Can you maybe just take a moment to explain this one?
Yeah, missing inventory. Unfortunately, this happens more often than we like. Maybe a selector mispicked a location. We have product in inventory, but it's not physically there. So our procedure is that our users will move that product into the missing FS location, and then that product gets frozen with a missing status. This missing FS location is monitored by our inventory control team on pretty much all day long, and on second shift as well. So that's their indicator that once something pops up in there, they need to research that and try to find that product in the warehouse or figure out just what went wrong there. But it's important that it gets frozen so it has that.
Get shipped. Or no, that it can't get shipped. Yeah. You're not sending people to go try to pick something that's not there, that's missing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I love this approach. I've actually, when I heard about this from you guys, way back, I've actually suggested this to other customers as part of the inventory control process. If you, let's say a pallet's missing, you don't want to direct pickers to that location because it's not there. You don't want to increase your travel if not necessary, and make them now hunt for something else. But by putting that status, instead of just deleting it out of inventory, chances are it's going to, especially like a pallet, it's going to turn up somewhere else. Maybe it just got accidentally put in the wrong location. So when it does turn up, they'll just move it back from that missing location to its real location where they find it, take off the status so it's now available. But now you've retained all that great data from when it was received. Like you can trace it back, especially for recall purposes. It's so important to be able to trace it back to the originating PO, the receive date, the lot. Whereas if you delete it and then you find it, you're now investing more time trying to now research to match it back up to where it came from. So I love that approach. And then
that's a great point too. That these statuses, when you put something into these statuses or take it off of that status, that it's logged in the history section. Right. I think if you choose to have it logged, it can be logged in there, and that we use that all the time. Just to determine, hey, what happened with this lot? What's the history on this lot? So that's a great point.
And then this is also very interesting, something that I only saw Four Seasons do originally, and I've also since suggested it to other customers. And as part of, after this webinar, I'm going to post a little write-up on our LinkedIn site describing this. What Four Seasons has done is, to help manage their different statuses, to make it just pop out, when something does have a status, they've given it this color banding. So for example, green holdouts green, rework blue, and that flows not just to the user configuration screen, but it flows through to other screens. So when I do a product lookup of your Pepper Sweet mini mix, I can see right away anything with a status jumps out at me. With the blue banding, it's a rework. Yellow is for rotation. Or if I even drill into the location itself, like the rack reserve location, I can see that blue band to indicate the rework. So I just, whenever you're doing like a lookup, it just really jumps out at you instantly for this product if their status is on it. So yeah, I think it's really smart like you did with the bands.
Yeah, it's really helped us out a lot. Just having that visibility like that, it just pops out, and without that color, it's easy to kind of miss that status section. Since there's a lot of other things, a lot of other information on that screen.
Or even like if when you're allocating inventory and it jumped over it, why did it jump over? This is the oldest, and then again, it hits you. So you don't have to spend time researching. It really jumps out at you. Oh well, it's because it's in rework. And then
right.
The next thing too with Four Seasons that's a little bit unique. They do use one of our reports, inventory by status, but they also created a report called Frozen Inventory. And it's just a combination of all the statuses on one report where they can see, like for today, across the board for all their products by status, what, like if something's in rework or something's waiting for inspection, and especially if something requires action, that they can be just, real time. They can be aware of these things. So that was kind of neat too, a report that they created, and they integrated that into the WMS. All right, and then so just, I appreciate everyone's time. I know we're getting close to the hour. Really quick, I just wanted to sort of point out some other things that I've noted just over the years, different customers. With statuses, we touched on like the ones unique to Four Seasons. There's others that I've also seen. Supplier damage, we kind of touched on that a bit, that some customers, if they know it wasn't the warehouse that damaged it, it came in damaged, let's say on an inbound, but the truck's already left, so it now has to be stored in the warehouse. They might give it that unique status so they can get credit, but also so that they can wait until they've got enough, and then they'll have an order come down, maybe a different order type for return to supplier, that only pulls that status to send it now back to the supplier to get that credit. So it's just a way, like different visibility. If products under date control, I've seen close to code where it's getting close to expiring. So I know Four Seasons, they use the receive date, they use the statuses for that rotation. It doesn't make sense with produce to have, say, an expiration date, but things like perishable items where like canned goods, you've got dates, there it's nice to see, okay, it's not expired yet, but I'm getting close. I'm starting to get within that receive date to alert you so that the buyers can especially start to push to get that product, to sell it and get it out of the warehouse. So close to code would be shippable, but it gives, by having a status, it just gives you that visibility of items that you really want to push to get out. Expired means, okay, now it is, it's now expired. But again, maybe it's still good inventory, water that's, past that use date, it's still drinkable. You just wouldn't sell it to your normal sales orders, like through that chain. It would maybe go through like discounted orders. So it would go to a different order type. So again, like different statuses can control different behavior, different visibility. And again, like another example, spoiled, where no, and actually we saw some similar examples with Four Seasons where no, it's just not good. You want to ensure that it doesn't go out to anyone, and maybe it gets dumped. Or, like I mentioned, like a farm where it's used for animal feed. And then, just within WMS too, a lot of different ways to that, like with services, that you can set these statuses. So customers that you've got products under date control, it's really neat to set the service. Like each day, it just checks whatever's in the warehouse, and it can automatically put a status on based on today's date and that expiration date, or even it looks at the product received life to see if you're getting close. We also have a service where if you're production, you're like, and again, this may not make sense with packing like Four Seasons, but production where you're producing like baked goods or food packages, and you've got a date on there, but it always has to go through an inspection first before it can be released. So we can set that new inventory automatically with the status, like a QC hold, and if nothing happens after a certain number of days, like 2 days, 3 days, it automatically comes off that status. And now it means it's cleared, it's been 3 days, and now it can be shipped. But if there's an issue, and let's say it requires further inspection, then just like Four Seasons, I would go from one status to another status, and by manually changing it to another status, that status we won't automatically lift. And there are ways of controlling statuses too, just within the system, by unit, by pallet, by product lot, so like easier ways to manage that. So you're not always doing it, say, 1 unit at a time. And then the last two on my list here are just different order types, that you could receive in automatically with the status. Like if it's a customer return coming back to you, it can automatically get that QC status. So it has to be inspected before it can get shipped out. And the reverse on outbound, that you ship with certain statuses. So a lot of neat little things you can do. Hopefully we did not overwhelm you now with all of these options, but just like some food for thought. And then I know, my goodness, we went almost to the whole hour. Ian, I'll pass this back to you. See if I think we talk so much there are no questions.
Yeah. No, well, we actually have just 2 quick questions. Actually, someone was asking. This is obviously for you, Travis. Within the company, did you build a set of best practices for defining what statuses are in play, and who manages that and decides sort of on changes? Is like the steering committee? Just a quick sort of answer on that one.
Yeah. Well, to start out, I'll say that they were not really defined. It was just kind of word of mouth. We would verbally train on it, but as we grew and added more statuses, we definitely found the need to clearly define them. We found that certain statuses sort of overlapped. For example, the rotation and the rework. Well, how do you use them when product codes have those same 2 statuses? So it was definitely to our advantage to clearly define these status codes, and I kind of own that as the operations specialist, but I would work with the QC or buying or sales, whoever is initiating that status. We've asked them to define it.
Gotcha.
So the QC. The ones that QC are initiating, we have our QC manager. For example, with quarantine and recall, I specifically asked our QC manager, hey, what do you want the definition to be? So I would recommend having your WMS specialist, so one person own that configuration and just adding them in, and who knows that well. But there's no reason that others can't have input on what statuses to use.
Right.
It's just kind of as needed for your business.
Right, then the other question, and that'll conclude them, is do you place a time limit on how long inventory can remain in any particular status? Like, so for expired, or is there a certain time limit placed before the status expires and something has to happen to that pallet? I can't imagine they just sit there forever.
Right. That's going to be where our reports come into play. I don't think there's anything, and Fran, correct me if I'm wrong, that sets off an alert based on a time. It could, if you didn't monitor the statuses, it could sit in there forever. So it's something that you're going to have to put in place by your status definitions, and make sure that you have people monitoring the reports and looking for these status codes. And that's where your status definitions are going to be important. That you're defining them the right way, that it's clear, that you have a clear reason why it's being why it's in that status and when it should come off, and that people are looking out for that.
Well, Travis, thank you so much, and friend, thank you so much for joining us today and really giving some great information on managing inventory with status. I'm sure everyone's really appreciated. Just so everyone knows, there will be a replay available of this that will be available in the next 24 hours, and if you registered or attended, attendees will get it first and then registrants second. Also, as you see on the screen, is our LinkedIn AFS WMS group, which please sort of go on to there, use that link, find it, and join. And it's a great way to interact with people like Fran and Travis and other professionals in the industry as well. So on behalf of AFS Technologies, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to participate in today's webinar. As a reminder, you will get this copy within the next 24 hours. Other complimentary resources are available at afsi.com. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your week. And Travis, Fran, again, thank you so much. Thanks to all for attending, and goodbye for now.
Thanks, Travis. Thank you, Ian. Bye, everyone.
Yes, thanks, Ian.